important of all, as many of you are aware, what makes a score sound in the theater every night is the result, at least, of two extraordinary people in my case. Paul Gemignani, our conductor, and Jonathan Tunick, our orchestrator, and also Paul Ford, the world's most tireless rehearsal pianist and a walking memory bank of every song that has ever been written for any musical on any continent. Thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Jared Bradshaw, and I'm having an hour-long conversation with an expert. I call it An Hour with an Expert. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is Broadway's Paul Ford. Paul, how are you?
I'm here.
I'm still here. Paul and I have these Sondheim jokes that we like to throw at each other. Showbiz jokes. They're not just Sondheim jokes.
Yes.
But Paul, we met really from me being a fan of Mandy Patinkin and Paul Ford in concert.
Yeah.
And I'm from Atlanta. You're from Atlanta, right?
Yes.
And I'm here in your awesome apartment here on 45th Street in New York City, where Lindsay and I lived, right?
Mm-hmm.
We lived up there, 2 flights.
Yes.
And we could hear you playing and rehearsing.
And I could hear her vocalizing.
Right, warming up for those high notes in Wicked. But Paul and I met, and I showed him, I think at a stage door, I showed him a picture of all of my Broadway posters. And you were like, oh, you have to come over and see my posters. And I was like, he doesn't know me. Is he hitting on me? What's going on?
Of course I was.
And I came over to this apartment, and this apartment used to be like my apartment was, plastered with show business everywhere.
My initial response to seeing that photo was, how did you get in my apartment?
Yeah, you
How
did say that.
How did you get in my apartment?
So I'll put a picture right here of Paul's piano and all of the pictures behind it.
Oh, my Lord.
But Paul has spent a lifetime in the theater and playing, accompanying, helping arrange, being the man on the piano in so many countless productions. Mm-hmm. And you've played for the greatest people in the world. I mean, the greatest celebrities. And you know the good ones and the bad ones. You've seen it all, right?
But my dear,
we're still here. Okay. So Paul has worked with everybody, and if Paul, if you say Paul Ford's name, they're like, oh yeah, Paul, who played every Sondheim show after 1984, or played all of Mandy Patinkin's concerts and Patti LuPone's concerts and toured the country. You guys got to, sing for presidents and perform on Late Night and
yes, we did.
Letterman. Tell me about some of the shows that you guys had performed
Let's see,
on.
Mandy and I we did a hilarious, it was from Hillary
Clinton.
We were in a tent on the front lawn of the White House, and Mandy and I only did a handful of numbers. But one of the numbers we did was Honey Bun from South Pacific.
101.
He usually divided the audience, and they would go sing part of the song with him.
Her hair is blonde and curly.
Her curls are
hurly-burly.
Yeah. So it would be a competition. Well, he got Hillary and Bill up on stage, and Bill lost the competition. So his side of the audience did not do as well as Hillary's did.
I did not say hurly-burly. No, I'm sorry. I had to.
So, I don't know. And then we were on Regis and Kathy Lee a lot, and we were on...
what were the late night shows that y'all did Somewhere Over the Rainbow on? What was that?
Letterman had him on just for an interview right after he recorded his first CD. So he said, sing something for us. Well, Paul Schaefer, didn't know any of the material. So Mandy said, oh, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Well, Paul put it in a really low key and played it like it was The Way We Were, really slow. And so Mandy went with it, but it was 5 minutes long. So David Letterman, for the next couple of weeks, started showing little snippets of it going, he's still singing. He's still singing it.
We'll have to look at that clip.
Oh, it's amazing.
Place behind the sun, just a step beyond the rhine. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high.
They finally had us come back because it just, I don't know why, but I had to crawl under the piano because I could not be seen. It had to be believed that Paul Schaefer was playing.
How funny.
So we were done in 2.5 minutes. But then he kept having Mandy back because it was such a campy thing and it was popular.
Yeah.
He got Tony Randall to come in with him, and they would run on stage and go, "Our car just broke down. We're headed for a benefit, and we have to rehearse. Can we use your piano? Thank you." So
I love that.
Mandy would sit there and sing one of his big over-the-top numbers, and Tony Randall would be, sitting like this, and then they would run off the stage, and that they must have done 6 or 7 of those.
Amazing.
They used to tell me I was building a dream. And so, can you after I say dream, can you just do a little snare drum? Technique. They used to tell me I was building a dream. And so I followed them on. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there, right there on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread? Once I built a railroad, made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once I built a tower.
I didn't have to teach Paul Schaefer the songs because he doesn't read music.
Wow, amazing. How do you get that far and not read music?
Easy.
A lot of Broadway actors do that, right?
Yeah, you're
Paul's
good at,
played so many Broadway auditions, right? For the legends.
Yes.
What's like the craziest one? Was it Sally Struthers? What's one of the
No.
craziest auditions where
it
it's
was
like, follow me?
It was Suzanne Summers.
Oh, this is a good one.
Came in for Into the Woods as a witch replacement, and like
You mean Into the Woods?
yes, Into the Woods.
I brought my Into the Woods LP for Paul to sign today. It's got everybody but Paul and Bernadette on it, so I'm working on that. Okay, so she came in for Into the Woods replacement.
Suzanne Summers came in, and like a lot of these, I'm just going to be politically incorrect, Hollywood dames, they don't think they need music.
Right.
So she came in empty-handed, and I just immediately start to sweat. What's she going to make me do? So she said, I'm not really a Broadway singer. I'm more of a jazz singer. And, of course, sweat. What? So I can sing a little bit of It Had to Be You. It had to be you. It had to be you. So, yeah, I sort of know that. I'm not sure about the bridge, but so she... Before I could even think, she turned to me and she said, "Find me."
Find me.
And then she started singing, "It had to be you." And it's like, "Find you?" Well,
And all of a sudden it's your fault.
yeah, so I found her, but she was somewhere in the cracks between F and E major. So they made us do it again once we found each other.
Wow.
So then they asked her if she had anything else. She didn't have anything at all. She didn't have any music. So she said, "I can sing a little bit of Adelaide's Lament." So I gave her a great big...
This is the key it says.
This is the key it's going to be in.
Honey. Not E flat and a half.
Fortunately, she started with, "In other words," that's the easy part of the song. If she'd wanted to do the whole front part...
The average unmarried
for God's
female.
So it has been, I've told that to so many people and in so many classes, this story is like, what not to do at an audition. Oy vey.
Oh, I love it. Well, you were very sweet. I got to audition for a couple shows when I just moved here. And I was like, I really want to go in for Thoroughly Modern Millie. And Paul's like, I'm playing those auditions next week.
Oh,
and you were
came
like,
in?
yeah. And you were like, show up and we'll see if we can fit you in at the end of the day. And I remember going in and getting to sing, and I was so, fanboy of Paul. I was like, I'm going to sing some Sondheim. What's like, I turn the corner. I'm going to be like, pretty women, fascinating. And Paul's like, oh, whatever, it's your funeral. But
I did not.
No, but you were very sweet to let me come in and get to come in and sing through things when like Roundabout or somebody's looking at doing a revival of Merrily We Roll Along. You're like, come sing through the score with me. I'll never forget that. It's one of my favorite memories.
Well, that was trying to find new material for Mandy, and I wanted to go through the whole score, I think. So,
that was
why
fun.
not?
Look at me, I'm rich. But I'm such a fan of yours and Mandy's because of those albums. And you helped find so many of the songs for those albums, right?
I found all
found them all.
Well, I take that back. I did not find Rockabye Your Baby with a Dixie melody.
Right.
That was somebody else. And
But there's so many songs I never would have known.
Yeah.
When the Red Red Robin comes bobbing along. Soliloquy. I learned Soliloquy in Trouble because you guys did it. Like, I mean, I know those are famous songs, but like when you guys did it, I was like, I've got to sing that. Actually the Sondheim show at the Kennedy Center, that was like the Stream of Consciousness show. That show like changed my life. About the medleys and throwing two songs that you never think would go together, like Liaisons and Another 100 People or whatever.
And Uptown, Downtown.
Yeah, Uptown, cut songs, amazing things. But I learned something in at Kennedy Center about doing a cabaret myself, is never give the audience the song list before. You and Mandy always, the list was there, but you didn't get the set list until after the concert. Yeah. And that was what was so awesome, is that you weren't looking like, oh, here comes Sending the Clowns or whatever, right? So I love that. And you guys taught me a lot about doing concerts, and I've done a lot this year. So let's see. So a lot of people are like, Paul played all of these Sondheim shows. Before we get to that, what were you doing in 1983, 84, right before you and Paul Gimignani were doing a little show by Kander and Ebb?
Yes.
And it was called
The Rink.
And I remember, I love that album of The Rink. And I remember telling Paul that when I met him. I was like, you did The Rink? I love it. And he's like, oh, that show. Because, you know, you were always like, it was just such a dirty, gritty, right?
It was. I mean, I couldn't believe I was in the room that first day of the sit-down
with, listen to
around
this.
the table.
Liza Minnelli, Cheetah Rivera, young Jason Alexander, right? And Kendra Scott Ellis, famous Broadway director.
And Rob
now.
Marshall.
Rob Marshall, come on, Chicago director. So Paul's worked with everybody and had them all in his living room on this piano. But seriously, The Rink played across the street at the Martin Beck, now the Al Hirschfeld.
Yes.
And one of my favorite Rink stories is you like having to warm up Liza Minnelli one day. You can tell the story and we can cut it later if you want to cut it.
Well,
please tell it.
All it was I was told to be on the other side at her dressing room door.
Now, is that on the stage floor, like a star dressing room?
Yes.
Okay,
and it was, so there I was sitting, and this little old man was sitting there with his hat, and he was escorted into the dressing room, and then I heard
Who was he?
Exactly.
Oh.
Then I heard these sounds like, oh my God, he was doing them, and then she was doing them, and he was doing honk, 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 honk. And this was to get her up to where she could sing, "Where are my colored lights?"
The belting in that is insane.
So then he came back out, and I was ushered in because I had to play something, a change in the finale. And she had a little tiny little piano about this big, and the last three notes in the bass did not work.
No.
And what she needed the most was me to hit a big bass note. And there was no bass note, and she got so frustrated. But that was really funny. That was the only time I was allowed in the inner sanctum of her dressing room.
And that was a rough time for her. Like, she left the show early or something, and Stockard Channing came in.
Yes, she did. And it closed.
Paul gave me his Rink poster from his wall, which I will always cherish. I actually got, when I was doing Forbidden Broadway, I got Cheetah Rivera to sign it. Cheetah came to an opening. Here's a picture. And it was so awesome to have Paul come to Forbidden Broadway. Even after I wasn't in it, we would go. That was
always fun.
And everybody loved, because even in the Mandy Patinkin spoof, "Come on, Paul, bring me home," all the actors would. He got a shout out in Forbidden Broadway, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So what happened? Tell me, what happened while you were doing The Rink? And Paul Gimignani said, "Hey, do you want to stay here?"
Let me tell it.
I know. Sorry. He's got good stories, and I love them all. That's why I'm recording these. An hour with an expert.
We had already done a workshop of The Rink, which was what it was, and then we took time off. Then we came back to rehearse it for the Broadway thing. And sometime late in the studio rehearsals at 890 Broadway, I took my break in the men's room, and I came back out and, was just, idly going back in the room, and Paul Gimignani, the conductor, was standing there, and he goes, let me ask you something. Well, you can stay with this show after opening night if you want to, or you can come with me over to a little show called Sunday in the Park with George. And I just stood there and looked at him, and I went, "Let me sleep on that." And I went, I'll take Sunday in the Park with George, please. For $100.
You were like, get me out of here.
It was like, get me out of this show, but get me to that show.
And
that was, I went home and screamed to my partner to the heavens.
Yeah, because you grew up going to see Company and Follies.
And live music.
On Broadway.
Yeah, but yes. So
this was an opportunity of a lifetime that just sort of dropped in your lap.
It did.
But that was and Sunday in the Park with George was an off-Broadway, who knows what question mark, with a new book writer, James Lapine, and Stephen Sondheim, of course.
Director, yeah.
But this is after Mary Lou Roll-Along, so he had that was a tough flop. And so it was like, what's this going to be? But you were like, forget Liza and Cheetah and John Kander and Fred Ebb, this is not working. I'm going to go do that.
For me.
Yeah, not working for me. For me. So that's amazing.
A picture of Ethel Merman right there.
Yeah. Did you ever meet Ethel Merman?
I did.
Okay.
My Ethel
Tell
Merman,
us that story.
No, it's real quick. It's easy. She wrote an autobiography, the famous one where the chapter on her marriage to Ernest Borgnine is a blank page, and you go to the next chapter.
The whole chapter is a blank page.
So we went to Lenox Square in Atlanta, Georgia.
Love that mall.
She was sitting on a platform, and we bought the book. I took it up there, and she went, Ethel, signed it, and that was it. But then I guess it wasn't too much long after that, my parents and I were up here in New York, and somewhere in the book it said that she volunteered at Roosevelt Hospital.
Yeah.
So I made note of that. So Mom and I, on whatever day it was, a Wednesday, we went to the main entrance of Roosevelt Hospital, went up to the front desk and said, is it true Ethel Merman volunteers here? And this guy, he was really gay. He kind of looked that way and he looked that way and he went, come back tomorrow at noon. So we came back the next day and we were sitting there. And here comes this old lady walking through. And then my mother had a problem with laughing. So she was expecting young Ethel Merman.
Yeah.
And we were getting really old Ethel Merman.
What year was this?
This was probably around 1970 or something.
Amazing.
I think it was after she finished Dolly, so it was 72.
But before like the Love Boat.
Yeah. So we gave her a minute. We went back into the gift shop where she worked, and there were like 5 little old ladies back there.
She worked in the gift shop? I thought she was like singing for people.
No. She just worked in the gift shop as a volunteer. So they all had orange schmatas on with name tags, and it was like Joan, Lisa, Ethel! Her name tag.
You gotta buy a gift of what, kid?
So I took my gypsy my gypsy album up to her. I said, we've always loved you. Would you mind signing this? She went, oh, look at these. And she signed them. And then we bought some certs, so we didn't just waste
certs. Remember certs?
Certs.
Wow.
Breath mints. And then we thanked her profusely.
I love the story.
I gave the cover of the score, the signed cover, to Patty on her
Patti LuPone.
60th birthday, 65th birthday, after she'd done Gypsy and won a Tony Award. And, are you sure you don't want to keep this? And I went, no, I got to let it go. So I let it go.
What a gift to give Patti LuPone autographed Gypsy Julie Stein score. I mean, that's amazing. Why he didn't give it to me, I don't know. No, he gave me plenty of things. Many things, George.
So that you've given me many things.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so amazing.
Okay.
So Sunday in the Park with George, you were there for all the cuts and the rewrites, and oh my gosh, is there a second act? And this book with James Lapine came out, and I've learned a lot about Mandy wanting to quit, and Bernadette was the biggest star in the show. I mean, she was more famous than anybody. And
had done more flops.
Yeah, sure. La Strada
and Mac and Mabel was considered a flop.
Yeah, in '74.
So
amazing. But so what was that like when, these songs are being cut and there's no act 2? Was it terrifying? Or were you like, it's all going to be okay? Because the show ended up winning the Pulitzer Prize the next year.
Well, the second act, we had It's Hot Up Here, which had been done in the workshop and rehearsed, and everybody knew it.
Right.
It was staged. Then we had nothing. And this whole, coming to the present and this whole modern art thing, this chromaloom thing, that none of it was written. And then after that, there was a slot for what would eventually become Children in Art.
Yeah.
And then after that, there was a slot which would become lesson number 8.
Amazing.
And then right before we moved to the theater, we got this huge song, something called Move On. And we taught it to them, but there were still these big holes in putting it together.
Yeah, and the song Putting It Together. Sondheim wrote this song, and I think that is his longest song. That and the opening of Into the Woods, opening part 7. Oh, that's a long...
Try 17.
And there's a lot in the score, if you look in the score. First of all, if you look in the first page of the score of Sunny in the Park with George or Passion, probably Into the Woods, it says the composer wishes to thank Paul Ford and Steve Clark for their contributions to the score, right?
And Ted Sperling and Scott Frankel.
Yeah, but have Sondheim thank you in the score.
Do you know, I didn't know that was that. Even on Assassins, I didn't know.
Amazing.
For the longest time.
Let me see if I can find this clip. There's this great clip of Sondheim accepting maybe best score for Into the Woods. And he thanks the indefatigable indefatigable Paul Ford, who knows what did he say?
Every song, every Broadway show tune ever written, and blah, 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 blah.
It's amazing.
Tireless, whatever.
Let's see if we can put it right here. It's amazing. I mean, to get a shout out like that, it's pretty cool.
Particularly to Paul Gemignani, our conductor, Jonathan Tunick, the extraordinary orchestrator, and Paul Ford, the same indefatigable master of the musical theater, who knows every song ever written and plays them the same way. And thank you very much.
I remember when you guys were working on the Wise Guys Bounce Roadshow Gold show, and you and Hal Prince and Sondheim and would go in a room and just play through it, right?
Well, we had a read through, and Sondheim had written a whole lot of new songs. Right. And the night before, he made a demo of them, and I was sight reading, and he was singing and knocking back shots, between each take and using his own little, recorder. So we recorded them, and it was essentially a rehearsal for us.
Right.
And then the next morning we went to Hal Prince's office, which I'd never been to.
Amazing. And
we were there, and Hal read the script, and Sondheim and I did the songs, and it was...
for you to get to work with Hal and Steve...
that was really fun.
That's cool.
And I do have the recording of that. It's not great, but...
You gave me a cassette of it ages ago. I have a copy of it because he knows I love that kind of stuff. That's amazing. Okay, so Sunny in the Park with George. So you ran for a while, and Mandy and Bernadette left, right? And Marion Plunkett and Robert Westenberg.
Everybody. Chris Gronendahl did it.
But then you guys got to film it for PBS, and the stars came back. And the Pulitzer Prize had been won, and so it was like, this is a big deal because La Cage won Best Musical that year, and so this was a huge deal.
I think it's a very good film of it.
Yeah.
And what can I say? I also think that the soundtrack of the film, the PBS version, is more listenable than the actual original cast album. Okay. Which don't get me talking about it, because that recording day was a disaster. And I can hear all the mistakes and all the craziness and the weird edits.
But you're Paul Ford. Nobody else.
I know, and nobody else seems to think. And I guess it won a Grammy or something, but I can't listen to it. I can listen to my rip of the soundtrack from the...
Okay, nice. So that show was recorded. Another Sondheim concert you got to work on that you worked on the Anyone Can Whistle concert. That recording you can't stand, right? Because there's so many mistakes. It was live.
It's a mess.
But that was with Angela Lansbury, Madeline Kahn, Bernadette Peters.
And Scott Bakula.
Scott Bakula, right?
And Chip Zien and Ken Page.
But I love that album. I think I fell in love with that album. Of course, the original is unbelievable with Angela Lansbury.
Yeah, it is.
Harry Guardino and Lee Remick and
all those great orchestrations.
But I love that there is an energy in that live recording. But speaking of Sondheim live recordings, you also did Follies in concert, right?
I did not play the recording.
But you played every single rehearsal.
I was the rehearsal pianist on the documentary, having no idea I was being filmed.
You have to watch this documentary with Elaine Stritch and Carol Burnett
and
Adolph Green,
Remick, and Compton and Green,
and Mandy Patinkin,
Barbara Cook,
George
Hearn.
Come on.
And that was really, that half hour of that documentary is like, well, okay. Plus, I'm 160 pounds in that.
If you just had done that is like That's just legendary. That in that concert, it's so great.
And then I just went to see it, because I wasn't on stage. But
So why did they not have you play it?
well, I was new, and also
It was
stylistically,
'85, I guess.
whenever it was,
Right after Sunday.
stylistically, it was maybe they just didn't trust me. So Tom Fay, who was the original pianist, he was the other rehearsal pianist on the Rink and on the workshop of Sunday in the Park with George, and a monster piano player. And he could play all kinds of styles. So they had him, Paul felt he was more secure.
Sure.
And, so
We'd work whatever.
I was
work
this
in
little kind of classically dee, and this guy was.
But man, and they changed some keys for Barbara Cook, made them higher, right?
Yes, they did.
And I love on that video, she gets so frustrated because she's like, the intervals, and you're just over
She
there
got
like.
it perfectly.
But amazing. Barbara Cook, I mean, all these people that you've worked with.
Also from Atlanta.
A Southern Bill.
Yes.
Amazing. So you did that Sondheim Lupine show, Sunday at Park with George, and then they did another show that started with Act 1, and then Act 2, everything goes completely the opposite. Haywire. Totally crazy, Into the Woods, which is just one of my favorites. Seriously. And so you guys started that show in San Diego, right?
Yes, it was at the Old Globe Theater. We had 2 acts and a lot of missing songs. And
Who played the witch in that?
the witch was Ellen Foley.
Ellen Foley.
And
Songs. Sorry, Welshie, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
no, she kind of told me that on the first day of rehearsal in New York that a certain director came up to her and said, you're not going to New York with this. And she just was like,
What?
but she ended up getting to be the last witch on Broadway.
Out
of 1,000 replacements.
I think with Felicia Rashad, right?
Yes, and Nancy Dussault and Betsy Jocelyn. And
I remember seeing something, Sondheim signed something to her. It was a picture online to Ellen Foley, and it said, to the Alpha and Omega Witch, because she was the first and
last
last.
and the last.
I think that's pretty cool. So what songs were in that were crunch? Isn't there cut, like a Boom Crunch song?
Yes, Boom Crunch, which I always thought Streisand should record, and I think Steven Brinberg may have done it in one of his acts as Streisand. Boom Crunch was this kind of moody, dark, slow jazz waltz, which ended up being Last Midnight, which was an up-tempo, more energized, which is a better song. And then there was also a longer version of A Very Nice Prince, a longer version of this, a longer version of that. I don't think there were a lot of songs that didn't make it, but we moved them around. The big number that we rehearsed 2 hours a day that didn't make it past, the dress rehearsal was called Second Midnight. And it was a big first act production number with the entire cast. And it was all about, parents and children and everything, and back and forth, and people walking across the stage. And it was a lot of fun to rehearse. And there was a section of it that was da 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 da. Well, that was cut. But it also, I think in it went da 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 da. So it was like Children Will Listen.
But that first part is, what do you say to your child in the night when nothing's all black, but then nothing's all white? The added Barbra Streisand version of Children Will Listen.
Right.
So he saved that. That's cool.
Yeah, but it wasn't in the show.
Amazing.
So anyway, so that big number, we did it with an orchestra in front of an audience, gone the next day.
Wow.
And I have a recording of a press day performance of it with just piano, and it's like, there it is.
Amazing.
And I think they recorded it for one of these video incarnations of the PBS version.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a big number. And what else? I don't know. They almost cut I'm da 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 da. I'm so happy. That was the that was at the end of Act 1, and they cut it. And here we were in previews, or about to go into previews in New York, and it's like, that was such a great song. It's gone. And so then they gathered everybody upstairs and said, we're going to open Act 2 with that song.
Okay.
And little me went up to Sondheim and go, I had that idea too. I was thinking about that. And he said, well, why didn't you say something? Because I wouldn't dare.
Because I didn't want. Yeah. Amazing. Now tell me this. eventually Bernadette Peters was asked to come in to do it because she had started in the previous James Lapine Sondheim musical,
Yes.
and she was Bernadette Peters. But a bunch of people auditioned for The Witch, right? Before her, right? Am I right?
Suzanne Summers.
Suzanne Summers.
But she was a replacement. Yes.
And Patti LuPone, Betty Buckley? Tell me.
Betty Buckley did a 2-week, rehearsal of it between the Old Globe and between.
So Betty Buckley was almost the witch, is what you're saying?
Almost.
Wow.
And
something happened. It was like egos or notes.
no, I don't know what it was. I really honestly couldn't say, but
because her voice, she has that bright. I don't want to call it a harsh belt. It's just a fierce, pingy.
Yeah.
Like that is a belty witch sound to me.
yeah.
I mean, I love her.
So I just
So what happened? That just disappeared. They were like, sorry, it's not going to work out.
after that 2 weeks, I got a mysterious phone call from a certain composer who said, "Shh, don't tell anybody." He always says that, and then he goes and he tells everybody. So I said, "I won't tell anybody. What's going on? Just bring your score up to Bernadette's house on such and such day." And I went, "Okay." So
I would flip out.
we ran through the 2 numbers. There were only 2 numbers. That was just the Beans song and Boom
rap.
Crunch. Boom Crunch.
Uh-huh.
And he promised her that day, "We'll write you another song," which was "Stay With Me," and then eventually "Children Will Listen" was. So Bernadette and I rehearsed these songs, and then we did a reading in some fabulously wealthy townhouse
Right.
on the east side.
Like to get money, right? A backer's audition.
I think just to see how it was feeling, but also to introduce Bernadette. So when she walked into that townhouse, everybody was like, "What's this?" So then she nailed these songs in the read-through, and they were like going, and Chip Zien and Joanna Gleason were like, "Okay, I think they were saying, there's our Tony Awards."
Yeah.
But Joanna won it. But so it was.
Well, and when the Tony Awards happened that year, Bernadette had already left the show, right? She was like, "I'm only going to do it for a
Yes.
certain amount of time."
Yes.
And so that is also like a thing. But The Baker's Wife is the role in the
Yeah.
show. I mean, and
I told Joanna, the nerve of me. It's like, you're going to win the Tony Awards. Please don't say that.
don't say it out loud.
Please don't
So
say
this, Paul, this came out the year
so thrilled.
that Phantom of the Opera came out. And Phantom was like just this British phenomenon. Angel Lloyd Webber, Michael Crawford, Sarah Brightman. But so what, I didn't mean to knock you off.
No, I was letting you rest your...
So, but tell me, like that year, the politics of the Tonys and like, it's Sondheim versus Angel Lloyd Webber. What was the feeling like? Did you think that y'all were going to win, or you're like, they're not going to give it to us, or because best score went into the
best
Woods.
score and best book, I think, and Joanna, and I think that was it, right? It was like 3.
Yeah.
And then of course, so it's kind of fair in a way.
Yeah.
We weren't we didn't have the scenery. We didn't have the costumes.
Right.
And
but you did have that awesome inflated boot outside the theater. So let's put a
right
picture up
across the
here.
street.
This picture's so good.
And there are a lot of pictures of them constructing it.
Right, and
Just
putting it
those two.
together. And that theater is right here across the street from Paul's apartment. So when you did the Rink and Into the Woods, you just got to walk right across the street.
Well,
Sunday Park with George was a block away from your apartment.
it was, and Rags was.
That's the life, Paul.
Passion was close too,
Yeah.
and Assassins was over on 42nd Street, and then.
Well, let's talk about Assassins.
Okay.
Okay. Wait, before we talk about Assassins, I have to get Paul to sign this. This says everybody. It says Chip Zion, Joanna Gleason, Robert Westenberg, Ben Wright, Barbara Pine, Tom Aldridge,
Yeah.
Edmund Lindick from Sweeney Todd. But you open this gatefold, it's the most beautiful thing. Now Paul's my buddy, and you remember signing my tie for the
Sort of.
Patty Mandy concert?
Yes,
Amazing on
yes,
Broadway.com.
absolutely.
Bruce Glickas took a photo of this.
Yeah.
We had so much fun. My friend Elaine and I got to go to that, thanks to you, and got to go to the party. So I'm not
very
let you.
grateful.
I'm not let you mark on your
Yes,
on your
please.
chair.
Now, where
Wasn't
would
this
you
a
like
great
it?
poster?
It was Heidi
Sign right here.
Landesman. Okay.
Perfect
This is
spot.
right under.
Ben Wright, Jack.
Let's see if I can write.
Jack. And Paul always puts this little music
yes.
note. I love it. I got
Thanks.
Sharpie on my finger. I love vinyl records. I collect vinyl records, and I listened to this one. Look at that.
Try.
Because Paul, here's something. You probably did more performances of this show than any of these people that signed this. because you never missed, right? Tell me the story about, before we get to
I
Assassins.
missed a few,
But Paul Gimignani forced you. He made you get an understudy, right? Because you were like, I'm never going to miss. And you're like, if you are late or miss a flight or you get hit by a cab, we have to have somebody. Because Sunday in the Park with George is...
that was the show where I was introduced.
It's crazy.
The contractor who was the horn player who went doo-doo at the end of the show.
Yes. And the recording was not a French horn.
Trumpet.
It's a trumpet, not a French horn. Because the French horn is really hard.
I didn't like those changes. Yeah. But Ron Sell was his name, God rest his soul.
Right, keep going.
He kind of came to me and said, have you got your list of subs? And I said, list of what?
Subs?
Subs. He said, yeah, you have to have a list of subs. You know. And I went, oh, no one's playing this show but me.
Yeah.
This is my show. Yeah. My show.
Yeah.
So,
because to get a chair in a Broadway orchestra, it's hard, right?
But he said, no, you have to. The union requires you to take a 2-week vacation.
Yeah.
And I went, I'm not going to do it. And he said, you have to. So I really had a hard time. Into the Woods was an easy sub show, but Sunday in the Park with George, the only person that could really, really play it, and Paul Gimignani rejected 3 or 4 people. And finally, David Crane, with a K, dance arranger to the stars and for Rob Marshall's movies. He was the only one that could play it. And it was hard. And the setup in the pit was so hard. You know, you had to turn the pages with this hand like this because the music was over there. Here.
Crazy.
It was so horrible.
Broadway pits are so small, right?
It was, and it was just set up badly. And of course, you can never change it.
And the booth theater is tiny.
It was.
It's not meant for musicals, right?
And I had a synthesizer on top of the piano, so that had to sit there, where the music would normally sit, and a normal person would turn things.
Remind me to tell the synthesizer curtain story, because that curtain story is so good, with the cat and the gun. We'll get there later.
Oh, in curtains.
Curtains,
you mean the job I got fired from?
Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, but let's jump to Assassins now. Okay, Assassins. The next Sondheim show, you did Sunday in the Park with George, Into the Woods. The next one was Assassins.
Yes.
And I don't have vinyl of that because they stopped making vinyl of Broadway show albums then. So Assassins happened, another one at Playwrights Horizons.
Yes.
Impossible to get a ticket, right? Because it's such a tiny thing. And it was, 1991, right, when the Gulf War started, right?
Yes.
You started before it, and then the war, and it was like, how dare
Opening
you.
night, it was just like the war was
raging,
exploding. So.
But that show was like you and Gimignani and Starobin.
Michael Starobin playing a synthesizer part.
And Starobin orchestrated Sunday in the Park.
He did.
He did that, Dave, when we did that. And I was like, Michael Starobin is our orchestrator? I love that. But he also did Assassins. And,
he did. The recording, that great recording.
Yeah, they added all those instruments, right?
It was our consolation prize for a kind of a flop.
So cool with Deborah Monk and Terrence Mann.
That was a great cast.
Victor Garber.
And the cast that we had.
The revival of Assassins
was a great cast.
Well, that revival, the Joe Mantello one with Mario Cantone, come on.
Well, the first
Mark
one got terrible reviews. I mean, Mom came up, and we went to the Westway Diner, and we sat and read all the reviews the next morning. It was like, oh my God.
Right.
We played out our run, but it was like, this ain't moving to Broadway. So it wasn't until about...
Yeah, it's not the most commercial of shows, but it is a daring, awesome, thrilling piece of theater.
Yeah.
But, when you have people talking about, come here and kill the president, and the N-word, and, it is... it's intense for tourists to come in and see.
Jerry Zaks hated that song.
The director.
So much. Come here and kill the president.
The opening.
That Sondheim wrote an alternate that we never performed. We rehearsed it. And it was called The Flag Song, which ended up in Bounce.
So wow.
Da 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 da. It also became another national anthem.
Yeah.
But
I heard there's a great recording of Brian Stokes Mitchell singing that at some concert. If you want to hear that song, it's a good song.
The Flag Song.
Yeah, the Flag Song.
Everybody in the cast was going, oh no. We're not going to perform this show until they put the original back.
Yeah, and in that revival, I just remember when Neil Patrick Harris came out and they projected the Dallas video on his shirt. I wasn't alive then. I was born in '79, but I wept. It was great, and the whole roller coaster set.
Yeah.
It was an amazing production. Like, I didn't get to see the original, and I've gotten to see a bootleg that's passed around online.
Yeah.
But that revival was just like unbelievable.
And not everybody liked it, but that, first of all, the orchestra was 16, 17 instruments, which was better than 3. And we were split up at Studio 54, so half of us were in one of the box seats. And on the other side, no problem with coordination. Because, all you have to do is listen and watch the monitor. And we got to watch the show every night, which never happens.
Wow.
And that was so thrilling.
Yeah.
And you could look down in the audience and see Lauren Bacall sitting down there, or, this person or that person. And it was so thrilling to do that show. And
you love those people. And it's weird when you do a show like Assassins, all I hear is it was so fun.
We had so much fun.
That, like, for a show about, people that try to kill the president, like, it's a fun show for people to do.
Somewhere, Dennis O'Hare has the entire rehearsal period, including the tech rehearsals, on digital film.
Oh, wow.
He never gave it to any of us.
I think I remember seeing some performance at Roundabout, and it was the closing show. Maybe it was this London Sonny the Park that came back.
Probably.
And he was Sondheim was standing in the back, and he set up a VHS camcorder. And he'd take the show, and the ushers were like, we can't tell him. It's like totally illegal, but like the ushers were just like, we're not going to tell him not to do it. And he set it up and pushed record and sat down. Amazing. Okay, great.
But I want to just say that that was 2004 for the revival.
Right.
That was the last good show I did.
Because you did so many shows at Roundabout, like pared down shows, and the orchestra kept getting smaller and smaller. I remember you inviting me to 110 in the Shade with Audrey McDonald.
Right, yes.
And sitting in the mezzanine at the final dress rehearsal. Lonnie Price directed that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there by myself, and I was like, I can't believe Paul invited me to this. And, but I remember even more so when you did the reading of 110 in the Shade, and Stephen Pasquale was opposite Audrey McDonald.
Yeah, that was great.
My goodness, that was thrilling.
Yeah.
That was an amazing show.
Well,
and I got to turn pages for you. Paul knew I loved it and was his biggest fan. He's like, you want to come turn pages for me for this reading at the Roundabout with Audrey McDonald?
Yeah.
I also got to do it for curtains too. You had me turn pages for curtains.
Oh my God, but I didn't play all of that. That was Sam Davis who played most of that stuff.
Sam Davis, who does a lot of dance arrangements
Yes,
and
for Frozen, I
orchestrations.
think was his last big one. But
He did that terrible, he did great job. He did great job on that show, The Flop. I did Dr. Sex. He did the dance arrangements for that with Patrick Vaccariello. Anyway, this is not about me. It's about you. Next Sondheim show, we're going to 1994. Best musical winner. It's not Beauty and the Beast. It's the opposite of Beauty and the Beast, where the boy is the beauty and the girl is the beast. Isn't that funny? Those both happened that year.
Yep.
Let's talk about Passion, because this is a show that people love or roll their eyes at. It's an amazing, nearly sung-through show.
Yeah.
Sondheim calls it an epistolary show, right? It's all these letters, that are written, and a lot of recit, right?
Yes.
And how is this show? How did this show? Because people walked out in droves, like they could not understand why that somebody would fall in love with Fosca, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of those that had like visceral, like I either love it or I hate it kind of thoughts, right?
Yep.
It started with Maren Maisie naked, climaxing in a bed.
Jerry Shea naked.
And Jerry Shea, who from Damn Yankees, I love him. But it started with that, so the tourists are already like, whoa, there's naked Maren Maisie.
Yeah.
And the first chord is like essentially a climax. Da, da, da.
And just so you know that's the chord from Psycho. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum, which he said he based, which was written by Bernard Herrmann, or Merman.
He loved old movies.
Who also wrote the score to this movie, Hangover Square, which Sondheim said totally influenced him his whole life. And that chord, the beginnings of the Hangover Square concerto are ba, 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 and it's the same opening chord as Passion.
Right.
And he intended that.
Amazing. I love that. There's a really cool story I remember you telling me about the end of the show and this nightmare sequence and the remembering, and you just sort of during rehearsal one day, if I'm getting this right, tell me, they were like, just play some music. Please tell me.
James Lapine said, we need some kind of a nightmare thing where Jerry or Giorgio is laying in bed and he's got the fever, and you know, there's mocking voices around him, and
the town is remote, isn't it? And provincial, don't you think? Like that.
Yes. So, but also Fosca, you know, is also hovering over him, you know, and like
with her mole moving around.
Yes,
the other side.
yes.
I love Donna Murphy. She's so awesome in that.
But you know, this was in the workshop actually, and I heard the talk that there needed to be a nightmare sequence, and it's like, wonder who's going to write that, because there was no dance arranger on any of these shows.
Sure.
So none, and Paul sat the men, the ensemble men, down in front of us, in front of the piano. He said, "Play him the Nightmare."
Gimignani said that?
He said, "Play him the Nightmare."
And you're like, what?
And I just, why don't you all guys turn to the town it is remote, or whatever. Oh, how can I describe her? The ugliness. Yes, turn to that page and said,
self-pity.
Everybody sing it. So they all sang it, and then I don't know how, but it just was like, and then Paul said, okay, now you guys start, you know, half a measure late. So it became a round. That was one of his favorite things to do. And so it's like, okay, so we finally had the nightmare sequence. It wasn't very long, but it was just like, play it. Okay. And so then I had to go home and remember what we did and write it out. Not on finale, with pencil on paper.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there was no finale at that moment yet. So. And
then it's in the score. Like, it's like what?
Exactly as I imagined it that day, which was just to cut to The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which was another big flop I did.
At the Minskoff. I had a ticket to that. That was returned.
That had so much of this kind of stuff. Play him the Cave song. I had a lead sheet for one chorus of a piece of music.
Which means it's not the sheet music, it's just some chords.
It's just the melody. And it's like, we needed a 7-minute number. It's right there with everybody staring at me. So that was the nightmare in Passion, was doing that thing.
There's so many things in Passion that are just perfect. And then there's all the soldiers and the 8 ball in the side. Like, I'm like, can we just, I want Passion to just be 3 people. Can it just be 3 people? And
Seems like it could.
Cut and, you know, because some of the no one has ever loved me as deeply as you, one of the most beautiful melodies. I love that song.
That was a huge number that had Giorgio running down the halls to her bedroom, and it was almost a tango. It was like da 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 da.
I love it.
And finally, Paul, he took me into the pit. And he said, "Okay, play a chord, broom." And then he had Jerry Shea down there. No one. So all we did was we took out the entire accompaniment.
Wow, amazing.
And made it into a recitative.
And the opening song, all this happiness merely from a glance in the park.
Well, that was note for note.
Yeah.
That was Sondheim's, that song and I Read were note for note what he wrote. And then a lot of other stuff in the show was kind of like amorphous, and you know, we dropped lyrics.
Ooh, here's one that I think of that I love, that I sang because you and Mandy did it on that Oscar and Steve album. I wish I could forget you.
Yes, I love that.
Erase you from my mind. I love that one.
To me, that's Sending the Clowns.
Yeah, well, that's such a cool song that, like, you know, not many composers. It's sort of, people will say we're in love in a really twisted way. It's like, here, write this. This is what I want you to say to me. I wish I could forget
and
you.
he keeps protesting. She goes, please.
Just pick it up.
Do it.
And then at the end of that show, he's like, I love you. And some people at the beginning laughed, but like...
Oh, the laughter on the first week of previews was out of this world.
Yeah. So that show, Passion, so it won Best Musical.
It ran 9 months.
It ran 9 months. But that's one of the shortest runs ever of a Best Musical. That and Hallelujah Baby, I think, are the shortest running Best Musicals. But can you tell me your favorite Elaine Stritch story? It can be good or bad.
Well, if you don't mind a little cursing.
Sure. I mean, that was Elaine Stritch.
She asked me to play for a little memorial service at Sardi's for a friend of hers who died. She sang the song, "Hey, good looking, what you got cooking?"
Okay.
So we went over and did it, and it was pouring rain. She said, "Would you stay with me? And would you walk me over to Orso? I've got to go to a show tonight. I got an hour to kill."
Right.
So we got into her car, which went pouring rain. Anyway, we finally ended up on, if you knew where Orso was and Sardi's was.
46th Street, yeah.
Anyway, so we got in there, and all the wait staff went, "Stritch, Stritch, the Stritch, the Stritch, Stritch, Stritch." They moved this couple from their table.
Legend.
And put us sitting there. And so we were sitting there, and I just said, "Elaine, it's 20 minutes of 8. Maybe you should get something to go." Or something. "I'll just get some soup." And she said, "Yeah, you're right." I said, "Well, where's the play?" And she said, "Oh, it's on 45th Street. I went, "Well, you have your ticket, right?" And she says, "I go up to the box office and say, 'I'm Elaine Stritch, and I want an orchestra seat in the back, center, and I'm not paying.'" And the punchline, "and I'm not paying." And I just said, "Oh, well, that's great. Did anybody ever say no?" And she said, "Fucking Mamma Mia." And I was sitting there going, this is my story.
I love that Elaine Stritch wanted to see Mamma Mia.
She wanted to see Mamma Mia, and they wouldn't let her.
Amazing.
"I want an orchestra seat. Yeah.
That is
And
so
I'm
funny.
not paying."
That is so funny. Here's somebody else that has done that. Joel Grey was in an interview once and said that he wanted to see Hamilton off Broadway at the Public. And, it was the hottest thing and possibly get a ticket. And he didn't have one. And Joel Grey said that in this interview that he just walked up and said, "Hi, 2 seats under Joel Grey." And they're like, "We don't see anything. Sorry, Mr. Grey, just a second." And they went back and talked. And they're like, "Joel Grey, he's not here, but he's saying he has 2 tickets. It should be." They're like, "Just give him, who's the producer's seats." And so Joel Grey was like, "That's how I got Hamilton."
It works.
But that's hilarious. Who's the craziest, biggest celebrity you've ever worked with that you were insane? I mean, having worked with Carol Burnett and Elaine Stritch and Liza Minnelli. And
Lauren Bacall.
Lauren Bacall. Okay, tell me Lauren Bacall's story.
Well, I was asked by Sondheim if I'd ever worked with her, and I went, "Not really. I was in a rehearsal room with her once, and she spritzed some orange water on my face, and I just kind of wiped my face and said, 'Oh, that's very refreshing. Thank you.'" And so I told
Were you honest? Was that honest?
But I was shocked.
Okay.
And so I told him that, and he said, "Well, what would you be interested in playing for her at Leonard Bernstein's 70th birthday celebration at Tanglewood?" And I went, "Oh boy,
wow, Leonard Bernstein." Okay.
So he said, "And it's this song called The Saga of Jenny, and I've rewritten it as The Saga of Lenny." And I went, "Steve, that's my favorite song of all time." So he
was like, "I'm not surprised."
So he put little bits of Bernsteinisms between each of the 400 choruses of that song and rewrote the lyrics and all about Leonard Bernstein. So I was sent over. No, first we were going to meet. So we were at Sondheim's and we were waiting, and then the doorbell rings and I hear this clomp, clomp, clomp up the stairs, and it's Bacall, and she goes, "I want to meet this guy who says I threw orange juice in his face."
Thanks, Steve.
I looked at Steve and went, "Come on." So when she came in,
you were thrown into the fire.
And I said, "You spritzed me with some orange mist." And she went, "Oh, okay." So then I got to spend a week or so at her beautiful apartment at the Dakota apartment building.
Wow.
Playing one of Cole Porter's pianos.
That's the building where John Lennon lived, right?
Yes.
The Dakota.
And she was so nice to me.
Wow.
And I loved every second of it.
I love
then we got up to Tanglewood, and we had a whole day where we had to kill. We were the very second to the last on the 4-hour evening.
Wow.
At 1 a.m. in the morning, we were to go on it. Oh my.
Holy
so
cow.
both of us were nervous as shit. And so we kept going into a room here and a room there and running it 5 times. And finally we did it, and it's on YouTube, and she does great. I don't like the way I played. I was much too tired and not energetic enough, but it's what it was.
Wow.
And it was thrilling.
Poor Lenny, time and again he complained, I'm in this dreadful bind. I feel for Leonardo. God, genius is so hard. Oh, you cannot make up your mind.
And then I kept running into her. I ran into her at Assassins in 2004, and my mom just happened to be in the audience that night. So we were waiting backstage. I was going to introduce her to Mario Cantone, and the door flew open, and in walks Lauren Bacall, and I said, could I introduce you to she remembered me. I said, could I introduce you to my mom? She said, of course. So my mother, we had to lift her up off the floor.
I'm sure.
That was one of the greatest.
Paul,
things.
I love your stories. I'm gonna ask for one more story for you,
Okay.
if you, because I never got to meet your mom, but she seems like the most amazing human being.
She was.
And she made you, so obviously.
Oh God.
I've just seen so many pictures of you guys. But my favorite is you and Bernadette Peters have been friends from doing so many shows and benefits and concerts and reunions and all these things.
Yes.
But when Bernadette did Gypsy, my favorite Gypsy, I saw that one so many times. You did Gypsy at Ravinia with Patti LuPone. You took your mom back to see Gypsy, right? And, to see Bernadette. And you took her back because you wanted your mom to say hi to Bernadette Peters
Again,
afterwards.
yeah.
So what did your mom say that embarrassed the...
No, it wasn't my mom.
Oh, it wasn't.
Also, for the one and only time, my brother came up to see something I did.
Okay.
With his wife, who is a wonderful woman, but she's a little wacky. So
Aren't we all, Paul? Aren't we all?
The three of us went into Bernadette. We were escorted into Bernadette's dressing room. And my sister-in-law, Lynn, from Ohio, said, wow, you were up there singing all night long and the veins were popping out of your neck. And I just thought, please.
The veins were popping
out of your neck. And so Bernadette took a little pause and went, yes, it's a very difficult score to sing and I have to be very, very careful. And you're much shorter than you look on stage.
Paul's like,
Stop!
I'm sorry, Bernadette. Nice to see you.
So we got out of there and we were in Schubert Alley and I said to my brother, I said, Tom, please tell your wife that when you meet somebody, don't talk about their height,
their
or
physical
their
appearance,
weight,
or their neck,
or their veins. So that was that story. No, my mother, all she did was go up to Bernadette's musical director and say, give my son a job, would you please? I was like, Mom, come on.
Paul, this has been an hour with an expert, and it's our first one, and I've loved this. I mean, this has been so fun. And there's so many other showbiz stories that Paul has. Paul has written an amazing book that it's really amazing, and it's more of this. That book, what is it called?
Well, originally...
Now, what is it called?
Originally it was called 100 Million Miracles.
100 Million
Based on the
Miracles.
first song I ever played on the piano.
Flower Drum Song.
Then I had put it on mothballs for a long time and decided to dust it off. I called Sondheim and I said, if I, Jerry factor this book into my experience and influence with you, would you mind having your name in the title? This was my publisher's idea. So,
right.
So he said, I'm very flattered, sure. And so he helped me with the title. He said, well, first of all, that one sounds like we live together. But how about this? Working with, Take Me to the World, working with Stephen Sondheim.
Take Me to the World. It's a song.
So we sent
Steve
him...
said that. No,
Yes.
your friend said that.
No, Steve said that.
Stephen Sondheim said that? It should be Take Me to the World?
No, I chose the song.
Oh, great.
And then he chose the working with Stephen Sondheim.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad to introduce the world to my friend. And Paul is retired and here, and he plays the piano every day. He's got a gazillion scores from Broadway to Disney to old Hollywood. You arrange things. So
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me for this today. And thank you for coming to lunch with me.
Oh, thanks
And,
for paying for lunch.
Of course. We were the ladies who lunched today.
Yeah.
We love Five Napkin Burger over there, just down the street. Anyway, thank you for joining me with an hour with an expert, and I can't wait to see who we have next. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
I love you, mister.
You too.
Love this guy.